The quiet birthday. It was my 50th birthday. As I sat in my living room, looking out the window, I couldn't help but reflect on the years that had passed. Birthdays for me were always a time of reflection. As a father, I had spent the better part of my life giving advice, offering wisdom, and being there for my daughter, Emily. But as she grew older, I could feel the space between us widening in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't that she was being distant or disrespectful. No. Emily was growing, maturing, and thinking for herself, something that every parent should want. But in some ways, I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. Tonight was no different. The house was warm, the candles on the cake were ready to be lit, and my wife, Karen, was in the kitchen preparing the final touches for our family dinner. It wasn't an extravagant celebration. We had never been the type of family to go overboard with birthday parties. For us, it was always more about the time spent together, the shared laughs, and the quiet moments of connection. I sat at the kitchen table, drinking a cup of coffee as Emily came in with a smile on her face. She had just finished her college classes for the day, and her energy was infectious, as it always had been. Emily was 23 now, an adult by all accounts, but I still saw traces of the little girl who would run into my arms for comfort. "Dad, you ready to get this birthday party started?" she asked, grinning. "Always," I replied, trying to match her energy. But as much as I loved this time of year, there was a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling of change. Emily wasn't the little girl who used to hang on every word I said. She wasn't the one who would rush to me for advice or for comfort. She was finding her own way, making her own decisions, and carving out a path for herself. "Can I ask you something, Dad?" Emily said, pulling out a chair and sitting down across from me. "Of course," I said, setting my coffee mug down and giving her my full attention. "I've been thinking about my future, about where I want to go with my career. I know I've always asked you for advice, but now, I don't know. I feel like maybe it's time to make my own decisions. Time to stop relying on what you think is best." Her words stung, though I tried not to show it. I could hear the quiet sadness in her voice, the hesitation that came from a place of uncertainty. She had always been such a strong-willed, independent young woman, but the idea that she no longer needed me as a guiding force made my heart ache in a way I hadn't anticipated. "I think that's great, Em," I said, trying to mask the tightness in my chest. "You're growing, you're figuring things out on your own, and that's what's supposed to happen. But don't forget, I'm still here, okay? Even when you don't need me for advice, I'm still your dad." Emily smiled, her eyes filled with both gratitude and the weight of growing up. "Thanks, Dad." The conversation shifted and we continued preparing for the night ahead. It wasn't a heavy conversation, but it left me with a lingering sense of change. The Emily I had raised was no longer the same little girl who would rush into my arms. She was becoming an adult with her own ideas, her own passions, and her own desires. Later, as the evening approached and guests began to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Maybe it was the way Emily carried herself now, more self-assured and less reliant on me. Or maybe it was the realization that my role as her guide was slowly shifting. As we sat down to dinner, I couldn't help but notice how the dynamics had changed. Karen, who had always been the backbone of our family, was smiling and joking with everyone, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She was feeling the same distance I was, though she hadn't voiced it yet. Emily was laughing with the other guests, her friends from college, and I found myself longing for the moments when it was just the three of us, sitting together, sharing stories, and feeling close. The dinner was lovely, as usual, but as I looked around the table, I realized just how much my daughter had changed. How much I had changed. I had always been the one offering advice, offering a shoulder to lean on. But now, Emily was the one with the confidence to carve her own way. The night continued, but something lingered in the air. A sense of uncertainty, but also a sense of pride. My daughter was no longer the girl who relied on my every word. She was carving out her future, and in that, I could see the beginning of a new chapter. "One last thing, Dad," Emily said, breaking me from my thoughts. "I know I haven't always listened to your advice, but I want you to know that I appreciate everything you've done for me, everything you've taught me." I looked at her and smiled. "You're welcome, Em. And remember, no matter what, I'll always be here for you. Even if you don't need me, even if you think you know it all, I'll always be here to support you." She leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. "I know, Dad, I'll always need you." As the night continued, I couldn't shake the feeling of change. But this time, it wasn't a change I feared. It was a change I had to accept. It was a change that showed me that my daughter, now an adult, was growing into someone who would be just fine without me always holding her hand. And that was the greatest gift of all. The unexpected gift. The night wore on, and the laughter around the table filled the house. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Emily's words earlier about not needing my advice anymore echoed in my mind. It wasn't that I wanted her to need me in the same way she did when she was younger, but it was the suddenness of it that had left me feeling unsettled. As the evening progressed, I watched her talk and laugh with her friends, the people she had met at college, people who didn't know me or our history, people she could relate to on a level I didn't understand. They joked about the future, their plans, and I saw a version of my daughter I had never seen before. A confident young woman making her way in the world, independent and strong. But then, during a quiet moment, Emily turned to me. Her eyes softened, and I could see the hint of something in her expression that made my heart skip a beat. She had been my little girl for so long, and now, even though she was becoming her own person, part of her still needed me. "Dad," she said quietly, pulling me aside for a moment, "I need to talk to you about something." I raised an eyebrow. "Sure, kiddo. What's on your mind?" She motioned for me to sit down beside her. "This might sound a little strange, but I've been thinking a lot lately about the advice you've given me over the years. I know I've ignored some of it, but it's not because I didn't appreciate it. I just needed to learn on my own, you know?" I nodded, sensing where this conversation was going. "I understand, Emily. We all have to figure things out for ourselves. But just because you don't always follow my advice doesn't mean I don't love you or that I'm disappointed in you. You're my daughter, and I'm proud of everything you've done." She smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes, as if she was trying to reconcile the fact that she was growing up and no longer needed to rely on me the way she once had. "I've been thinking about that. Dad, I know I've made decisions without asking for your opinion, but I think I finally understand what you were trying to teach me all along. It's not about always being right or following rules, but about trusting myself, about having the strength to follow my own path." I could feel a lump forming in my throat as I listened to her. It was like watching a piece of her childhood slip away. I was happy she had learned to trust herself, but I couldn't deny the bittersweet realization that my role in her life was changing. She no longer needed me to guide her through every decision. She had learned to trust her instincts. "I know I haven't always been the easiest to deal with, and I'm sorry for that. But I want you to know that I do appreciate everything you've done for me. You were always there when I needed you, even if I didn't say it at the time." I could feel the emotions building up inside me. The love I had for this young woman, the pride, and even the sadness at how things were changing. It was overwhelming. "You've grown up, Em," I said softly, my voice breaking a little. "I'm proud of the person you've become. I'm proud of everything you've accomplished, and I'll always be here if you need me. Even if you don't think you do, I'll always be your dad." She reached over and took my hand in hers. "Thank you, Dad. I love you." In that moment, it felt like time stood still. The noise of the party, the chatter, the laughter, all faded into the background. It was just me and my daughter, and for a brief second, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. Later that evening, when the party had died down and most of the guests had left, Emily and I shared a quiet moment on the porch. The cool night air brushed against our faces. And for the first time in a while, we sat in silence, but this time, it wasn't awkward. It wasn't that she didn't need me anymore, but rather that we had both reached a place of understanding. We had grown together in different ways, and our relationship had shifted from father-daughter to something new, a partnership built on mutual respect, love, and trust. "I have something for you," Emily said, breaking the silence. I turned to her. "What's that?" She pulled something from her pocket and handed it to me. A small, neatly wrapped box. I raised an eyebrow, puzzled. "What's this?" "It's a gift," she said with a soft smile. "For everything." I opened the box, and inside was a beautiful leather bracelet, engraved with the words, "Trust yourself." I looked at her, and a lump formed in my throat. "You're the one who taught me that," she said. "Now I want to remind you of it. You've spent so much time teaching me to trust myself. I think it's time for you to remember that you've taught me well. You've done your part, Dad. Now it's my turn to show you that I've learned." The gift was simple, but it was more than just a bracelet. It was a symbol of everything we had shared, everything we had gone through together, the good, the bad, the difficult times. It was a reminder that we had both learned to trust ourselves. I hugged her tightly, feeling the weight of the moment. "I love you, Emily, thank you. This means more than you know." And just like that, I realized something. Yes, my daughter had grown up. She was no longer the little girl who needed me for everything. But that didn't mean she didn't need me anymore. We were simply growing together, learning from one another, and adapting to the changes that life had to offer. In that moment, I understood that the love and bond we shared had transformed, but it would always remain, and that was enough. A shift in perspective. The weeks following, Emily's birthday dinner felt like a turning point in our relationship. I had spent so many years trying to be the guiding force in her life, the one who offered advice at every turn. But now, as I watched her make her own decisions, I realized that perhaps my role as a father was evolving. I wasn't just the one giving advice anymore. I was learning to trust her judgment and wisdom as much as she had learned to trust mine. Emily seemed to have grown even more in the days after that quiet moment we shared on the porch. I noticed a change in her demeanor. She was more confident, more grounded in her decisions, and it was clear that she was beginning to fully embrace her independence. But what surprised me most was how our relationship evolved. We weren't just father and daughter anymore. We were becoming friends, equals in our shared experience of life. Though she would always be my daughter, no matter how old she became. One afternoon, a few weeks later, I found myself at her apartment for a casual visit. It was one of those rare days when we both had time to catch up. So I decided to take her to lunch. When I arrived, she was in the middle of rearranging her apartment, unpacking a few things she had recently bought for her place. I had never seen her so comfortable in her space. She was finally making a life for herself, separate from mine, but I was proud of how far she had come. "You've really made this place your own," I commented as I took a seat on the couch. She smiled, but there was a hint of nervousness in her eyes. "Yeah, I guess I have." We talked for hours about everything, her work, her friends, her plans for the future. It was clear to me that Emily was stepping into the world with confidence and ambition, ready to tackle whatever came her way. But there was something else in her eyes that day, something I hadn't seen before, a quiet wisdom. "How are you feeling about everything?" "About what's next?" I asked, genuinely curious. She paused for a moment, then leaned back in her chair. "I feel good. I feel like I'm finally making the decisions that are right for me, not what others expect of me. I've realized that while it's important to listen to others, especially the people we love, at the end of the day, it's my life. I have to trust myself to make the right choices." It was a realization that I had seen in her for a while, but hearing it from her mouth, seeing the conviction behind it, struck me in a way that no advice I had ever given her could. It wasn't just the fact that Emily was embracing her independence. It was that she had the confidence to do so, even when it wasn't easy. "I'm proud of you," I said softly. "I've always been proud of you, but to see you grow into someone who trusts themselves, that's something really special." She smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I saw that familiar glint in her eyes. She wasn't a little girl anymore. She was a woman making her way in the world, and I knew that whatever came her way, she had the strength to handle it. The next few weeks felt like a whirlwind. We continued to have conversations that were more like exchanges of ideas, rather, than the typical father-daughter talks I was used to. We would laugh, joke, and even challenge each other in ways that made me feel as if we were equals. But there was still an unspoken understanding between us. She was my daughter, and I was still her father. I would always be there for her, just as she would always have a place in my life. The dynamic between us had shifted, but it wasn't something that made me sad or resentful. It was a natural evolution, one that had to happen for both of us to grow. I realized that I didn't have to be her protector anymore, at least not in the same way I had been. She had become strong on her own, and it was time for me to step back and let her forge her own path. But I still couldn't help but feel a pang of nostalgia when I watched her drive away in her car, heading off to work or school or wherever her life was taking her. There was something about seeing her out in the world, confident and independent, that made me realize just how far we had both come. One day, a few months later, I received a call from Emily. She had just finished a big project at work and wanted to tell me about it. I could hear the excitement in her voice. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that I wasn't the one teaching her anymore. She was teaching me. She was showing me how to live with more confidence, how to take risks, and how to trust my own instincts. "Dad, I did it! I can't believe it, but I did it," she said, practically jumping through the phone. I took a huge leap and it paid off. "I'm ready for the next challenge," I smiled, feeling that familiar pride in my chest. "I knew you would. You've always had it in you." In that moment, I knew that Emily had become someone who could handle anything life threw at her. She had learned the lessons I had taught her, but now she was adding her own wisdom to the mix. I was no longer the one leading the way, she was, and I couldn't have been prouder. That day, as I sat back in my chair, I realized that what we had now was more than just a father-daughter relationship. It was a partnership, a bond of mutual respect, love, and understanding that transcended advice, gifts, and milestones. We were both learning from each other, and in the end, that was all I could ever hope for. New beginnings and reconciliation. The weeks following that conversation felt like a delicate balance of change and growth. Emily had blossomed into this confident, capable woman, and I was trying to navigate my role in her life without overstepping. The transition was bittersweet. I had been her guide for so long, and now I was learning to sit back and trust her decisions. But I couldn't help but reflect on all the years spent trying to shape her into the person I wanted her to be, only to realize that she was always meant to shape herself. One afternoon, I received a call from Emily that would mark the start of a new chapter for both of us. She was at a crossroads, something she had never faced before. It was a professional decision, one that had the potential to change the course of her career, but she was uncertain about whether she should take the leap. She was torn between staying in a safe, comfortable position or stepping into something that could push her out of her comfort zone. "Dad, I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice sounding unsure. "I've been offered a promotion, but it means a bigger responsibility, more hours, and less time for the things I enjoy. I don't know if it's worth it." I could hear the doubt in her voice, and I understood exactly where she was coming from. This was the kind of decision that could define her future. But this time, I wasn't the one with the answers. "Emily, I can't make this decision for you," I said. "But I can tell you that sometimes the greatest growth happens when we step into the unknown." The fear you feel now is just a sign that you're on the brink of something bigger." She was quiet for a moment, as if processing my words. Then she spoke again, this time with more clarity in her voice. "I guess I've always played it safe, huh?" she said with a half laugh. "But maybe it's time to take a risk. Maybe it's time to trust myself more." I smiled to myself, feeling that familiar pride rise up in my chest. She was learning to trust herself, something I had always hoped for her. Over the next few days, Emily decided to take the promotion. She had made her decision, and it wasn't just because of the title or the salary increase. It was because she had come to realize that she was capable of more than she had ever given herself credit for. The leap didn't come without its challenges, but I knew that Emily was ready to face them. When she called me to tell me the news, her voice was full of excitement. "Dad, I did it! I took the promotion, and I'm feeling really good about it. It's scary, but I think this is exactly what I needed to push myself further." Her excitement was contagious, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in her decision. "I knew you could do it," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You've always had that strength in you. Sometimes it just takes a little leap of faith to realize it." As the months went by, Emily settled into her new role, and I watched with awe as she navigated the challenges that came with it. There were days when she was stressed, overworked, and unsure of herself, but I could see her resilience in every obstacle she overcame. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Our relationship continued to grow, but now it felt more balanced. We weren't just father and daughter anymore. We were partners in each other's lives, supporting and encouraging one another. I was proud of how far she had come, and I was constantly amazed by her strength. One evening, not long after Emily had started her new job, she invited me to dinner. We went to a cozy little restaurant she had discovered, and as we sat across from each other, I realized just how much we had both changed. We talked about everything: her work, my own experiences, the challenges we were facing, and the growth we had both experienced. It was a conversation we had never had before, one where we were both equals. "I've been thinking about all the years I spent worrying about you, trying to protect you from everything," I said, staring at my plate for a moment. "But I realize now that you've always been capable of handling everything life throws at you. I just needed to trust you more." Emily smiled, reaching across the table to give my hand a gentle squeeze. "And I needed to trust myself more." "I guess we both learned something in the end, huh?" I nodded, my heart full. "Yeah, we did." After dinner, we walked outside into the cool evening air. The city lights twinkled around us, and for a moment, it felt like the world had paused just for us. It was a simple moment, but it was everything. "You know, Dad," Emily said as we walked along the street, "I'm really glad we've come this far. I'm glad you're my dad." I stopped in my tracks, a lump forming in my throat. "I'm glad you're my daughter. Em, you've taught me more than I could ever teach you." She laughed softly and hugged me. "I think we're teaching each other, Dad." And in that moment, I realized that the greatest gift I had ever given Emily, and the greatest gift she had ever given me, wasn't advice or material things. It was the strength to live life on our own terms, the courage to trust ourselves, and the unbreakable bond of love that had only grown stronger with time. Part 5. The True Meaning of Family. Life continued on, as it always does. But the changes in our relationship had created a new foundation, one built on mutual respect, trust, and love. The dynamic between Emily and me was no longer that of a father-daughter hierarchy, but of equals, partners in the journey of life. While she had found her path and was thriving in her career, I, too, was learning how to live in a new role. No longer just a protector, but someone who could step back and admire the woman she was becoming. It was a Saturday afternoon when Emily called, and there was an excited edge to her voice that I hadn't heard in a while. She had a small victory to share, one of the many she had been collecting. since she took that leap of faith with her promotion. It was the kind of call that made my heart swell with pride, reminding me of all the lessons I had taught her and the ones she had taught me in return. "Dad, I did it again," Emily exclaimed over the phone, her voice bubbling with joy. "I just closed the biggest deal of my career so far. I can't believe it! I'm officially the lead negotiator for the new project." I couldn't help but smile, the pride in my chest swelling to the point where I could barely contain it. "I knew you would, Em," I said a little breathlessly. "You've always had that fire in you." Her laughter filled the line, and for a moment, it felt like everything was right in the world. "I couldn't have done it without the foundation you and Mom gave me. You always taught me to trust myself, and it's finally paying off." I paused, reflecting on her words. For so many years, I had thought my role was to direct her, guide her through every decision. But now I realized that the greatest gift I had given her wasn't advice or protection, and it was the freedom to become her own person, to trust her instincts and her abilities. It wasn't my job to hold her hand through life. It was my job to trust that she would figure things out. "I'm so proud of you, Em," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You've worked so hard, and you deserve every bit of this success. Don't ever forget that." "I won't, Dad. Thank you for everything." The call ended with a promise to celebrate, and that night, we went out for dinner. It wasn't an extravagant celebration. It was just the two of us enjoying a quiet moment together. But in that simplicity, I found the most profound sense of fulfillment. Emily wasn't just my daughter. She was someone I admired, someone I could learn from. As we sat across from each other at the dinner table, I realized how much had changed. We weren't just sharing a meal anymore. We were sharing our lives, our journeys. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: contentment. Over the next few months, Emily continued to grow in her career. She moved up the ladder faster than I could have ever imagined. And with each success, I saw the woman she was becoming. But more than that, I saw how much she valued the lessons she had learned along the way. Not just from me, but from her own experiences. One evening, after a particularly tough week, Emily sat down beside me on the couch. She looked exhausted but happy, the kind of tired that only comes from hard work and success. "Dad," she said softly, "I've been thinking a lot lately about everything we've been through. You know, about how much I've changed and grown." I smiled at her, knowing exactly where this conversation was going. "I've seen it, Em. You're not the same person you were when you were younger, but that's a good thing. You've learned to trust yourself, and you've built a life that's your own." She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a kind of wisdom beyond her years. "I've learned that there's no shame in making mistakes. I've made plenty, but those mistakes are part of my growth. And I've learned that you don't have to have everything figured out to be successful. You just have to keep moving forward." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Emily wasn't just talking about her career anymore. She was talking about life, about the journey we all go on, the missteps we make, the obstacles we face. She had learned that life wasn't a straight path. It was full of twists and turns, and the important thing was to keep going, no matter what. "I've made my fair share of mistakes, too," I said, my voice quieter than usual. "But those mistakes have brought me here. They've made me who I am. And I've learned that it's never too late to change, to grow, to be better." Emily smiled at me, a quiet understanding passing between us. It wasn't just about career success or personal achievements. It was about the realization that, no matter where we were in life, we could always keep learning, keep improving. "I guess we're both still figuring things out," she said, laughing softly. "But that's okay, right?" I chuckled, feeling a deep sense of peace wash over me. "Yeah, that's more than okay." As the years passed, Emily continued to thrive. She built a successful career, made lifelong friends, and found love. And as for me, I learned that my role in her life had evolved. I wasn't just her father anymore. I was her equal, her friend. someone who had walked beside her on this journey of growth and transformation. And through it all, I realized that the greatest gift we can give our children and ourselves is the freedom to trust, to make mistakes, and to grow into the person we are meant to be. And sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is simply step back and watch them shine. The distance between us. The first few weeks after Emily's move were the hardest. I had expected the silence, the stillness in the house without her laughter and her presence, but it didn't make it any easier to bear. The phone calls and video chats weren't the same as sitting across from her, hearing her voice in person, seeing the sparkle in her eyes when she shared her excitement. The house felt empty, not in a physical sense, but in a deeper, quieter way. I missed her, but I also understood why she had to go. She was chasing her dreams, creating her own path. As a father, I had always hoped that one day she would be able to do exactly that. To leave the nest, to find her own way, to become the person I always knew she was capable of being. Still, the house felt different. It was quieter. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of my own solitude. Emily called often, of course. She would share stories about her new city, the people she was meeting, the challenges she was facing at work, and the excitement of starting fresh. But I could sense that beneath the surface, there was an underlying feeling of uncertainty. She was thriving in her career, but adjusting to a new life, thousands of miles away from the place she had known for so long, was no easy feat. One day during one of our video calls, Emily looked at me with a serious expression, something I hadn't seen in her for a while. "Dad," she said, "there's something I need to tell you." I sat up a little straighter. "What's going on, Em?" "You know you can tell me anything." She took a deep breath, her eyes filled with a mixture of determination and apprehension. "I'm struggling. Not with work, that's going well, actually, but with the loneliness. I didn't expect it to be this hard, and I thought I'd be okay, but I don't know. It's just different here, and it feels like I'm doing everything on my own. I miss you. I miss home." I could see the vulnerability in her face, and for the first time in months, I felt a sharp pang in my chest. Emily had always been so strong, so confident in her choices, but now, in this moment, she was allowing herself to feel the weight of her decision. It was as though, for the first time in a long while, she was letting me in again, letting me see the parts of her that were still uncertain, still afraid. "Em, I can't imagine how hard this must be," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But I want you to know that you're not alone." "Not really. Even though you're far away, you have me. I'm here for you no matter what." She smiled softly, but I could tell it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I know, Dad, but sometimes I feel like I've made a mistake. Like I'm not supposed to be here. I miss the comfort of being close to family, being around people who know me, who understand me." I paused, thinking about her words. She was facing something that, despite all her achievements, was deeply personal. The realization that no matter how far you go, there's always a part of you that longs for familiarity, for the safety of home. It wasn't weakness, but rather a reminder of the bond that family creates. "Em," I said softly, "there's nothing wrong with feeling that way. You're in a new chapter of your life, and it's okay to feel lost sometimes. It's part of the process. You've taken a huge leap, and it's not going to be easy, but I know you're capable of handling it. You always have been." She looked down for a moment, then nodded. "Thanks, Dad. I think I just needed to hear that. I'm trying to figure out how to make peace with being alone here." In the weeks that followed, Emily began to find her balance. Slowly but surely, she started to connect with people in her new city. She joined a book club, met new colleagues outside of work, and began exploring the local scene, trying new restaurants, visiting art galleries, and getting to know her surroundings. Each time she called me, her voice was a little brighter, a little more confident. But it wasn't just the people or the places that helped her adjust. It was her ability to embrace her vulnerability, to admit that she wasn't okay all the time. She started calling me more often. not just for advice or to share achievements, but to talk about the small, everyday moments that had become important to her. We started to share our lives in ways we hadn't before. It wasn't just about the big decisions anymore, it was about the little victories, the moments of doubt, the changes that happened in our hearts before they happened in our lives. One evening, after a particularly long week at work, I received a message from Emily. She wanted to talk. As I picked up the phone, I could hear the excitement in her voice. "Dad, you won't believe it, but I finally found my rhythm here. I joined a weekend painting class, and it's been amazing. I'm learning to paint something I've always wanted to do but never had the time for. It feels good to do something just for me. Not because it's part of a bigger plan or goal. It's just fun." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "I'm proud of you, Em. It's so important to make time for yourself. To explore things that bring you joy without worrying about what comes next." She laughed softly. I guess I was so focused on the future that I forgot about the present. But now I'm learning to enjoy where I am, even if it's not exactly where I thought I'd be. I could hear the peace in her voice, the sense of acceptance. She had begun to understand that being truly content doesn't come from always having the perfect plan or the right answers. It comes from embracing where you are, flaws and all, and finding joy in the small things along the way. As I sat back, listening to Emily talk about her new hobbies, the friends she had made, and the experiences she was having, I realized how far she had come. She had left behind everything familiar, everything comfortable to chase something bigger, something more meaningful. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't always smooth, but she was doing it. She was learning to embrace the challenges, to live in the present, and to trust herself. And I was proud of the daughter who had grown into a woman with the strength to make her own choices, to face her fears head-on, and to build a life on her terms. Part 7, The Quiet Realization. Months passed, and life continued to unfold in ways that neither Emily nor I could have predicted. As much as we had both changed over the past year, something remained constant: our bond. It wasn't always spoken, but it was always there, a silent understanding that we had both grown, separately and together, and that we were no longer the same people who once relied so heavily on each other for validation and reassurance. Emily, now settled in her new city, was thriving. Her career was flourishing. Her personal life was expanding in ways she hadn't expected, and she was becoming the woman she had always wanted to be. Yet despite all her accomplishments, there were still moments of uncertainty, moments where she reached out to me for comfort, advice, or just to talk. And those moments, no matter how small, were becoming fewer and fewer. I couldn't help but wonder if that was a sign that she didn't need me the way she used to, or if it was just the natural course of things, the evolution of a daughter becoming independent and confident in her own choices. I tried not to dwell on it. As much as I missed the times when she would come to me with every question or concern, I knew that the most important thing was for her to find her own answers. My job as a father was never to give her the solutions. It was to provide her with the tools and the love to help her figure things out for herself. I had done my job. She was ready. But even then, there was a quiet emptiness in my heart. A space I hadn't expected, a space I wasn't sure how to fill. I had raised her to be strong, independent, and self-reliant, but now that she had become all those things, I was left wondering who I was in this new dynamic. One evening, as I sat at home, I received a message from Emily that would change everything. She had sent it earlier that day, but I hadn't seen it until later that night. It read, "Dad, I need to talk to you. Can we chat? I miss you." The words hit me hard. It wasn't just the fact that she missed me. It was the fact that she had reached out to me after months of being away, after months of me watching her grow and become more independent. I quickly dialed her number, my heart racing a little faster than usual. "Hey, Em," I said when she picked up. "What's going on? You okay?" "I'm good. she said, but there was a hint of hesitation in her voice. Actually, I'm not. I've been thinking a lot about everything lately, and I just realized something. Okay, what is it? She paused for a moment, and when she spoke again, there was an honesty in her voice that I hadn't heard in a while. I've been so focused on building my life, on proving to myself that I can handle things on my own, that I forgot something important. I forgot that you're still my dad, that I don't have to do this alone. The words were simple, but they carried more weight than anything she had ever said before. I stayed quiet, letting her continue. I don't need you to fix everything for me, Dad, she said softly, but I need you. I need your advice, your perspective. I need to feel like I'm still part of the family, like I'm still the little girl who asked for your help. I was stunned, to be honest. I had always thought that Emily was so strong, so independent that she didn't need me anymore. But hearing her words, hearing the vulnerability in her voice, made me realize that I had missed something in all the years of trying to give her space and independence. I had missed that there would always be a part of her that would need me, not for answers, but for reassurance. I said, my voice thick with emotion. You'll always need me. It's not about fixing things or making decisions for you. It's about being here, about supporting you no matter what. I've always been here for you, and I always will be. There was a long silence on the other end, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes when two people are on the same page, when understanding is shared without words. I guess I've been afraid to ask for that, Emily admitted, her voice tinged with a mixture of relief and vulnerability. I've been so focused on being independent that I forgot it's okay to let people in. I smiled softly, even though she couldn't see me. It's okay to ask for help. No matter how old you are, no matter how far away you go, you'll always have me. You don't have to do everything on your own. The conversation shifted after that. We didn't talk about anything groundbreaking. We just talked the way we used to about life, about her new experiences, about my own reflections. It was simple, but it was exactly what we both needed. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was losing her. I felt like we were finding a new rhythm, a new understanding of who we were now, as father and daughter, but also as individuals growing together in different ways. The weeks that followed were a mix of phone calls, video chats, and visits. Emily returned home for a few weekends, and each time it felt like we were rebuilding the bond that had changed so drastically over the past year. She would tell me about her challenges at work, her victories, and the struggles she faced in her personal life. I would offer advice when she asked for it, but most importantly, I just listened. There were moments when I felt the same pride that I had when she was younger, but now it was a different kind of pride. The kind that comes from seeing your child become someone who can handle the world, but still values the connection with you. And as time went on, I realized something important. The love between us hadn't changed. What had changed was our roles. Emily had become the woman she was meant to be, and I had become someone who could step back and let her live her own life, even if that meant giving her the space to make mistakes and learn on her own. But that didn't mean she didn't need me anymore. It just meant that our relationship had shifted, grown, and evolved into something deeper and more meaningful. Part 8. The Power of Letting Go. As time passed, the dynamic between Emily and I continued to evolve. The change wasn't as abrupt as it had been in the beginning. It wasn't like flipping a switch where everything became different overnight. It was more like the slow turning of a wheel, gradual and steady, pushing us both forward into a new phase of life. For her, it was stepping into her career with confidence and independence. For me, it was learning how to support her from a distance, without stepping in too much, and recognizing that the way I had always seen my role as a father was now shifting. It wasn't easy. The role of a father is so deeply ingrained in you, especially when you've spent years guiding, protecting, and providing. Letting go of the idea that you are needed in every aspect of your child's life can be daunting. But as Emily grew into her own, I began to realize that my job wasn't to hold on tight. It was to give her the space to grow, while always being there when she needed me. I had always prided myself on being the kind of father who provided practical advice, who had an answer for everything, who could fix whatever was broken, whether it was a flat tire or a broken heart. But the truth was, I had spent so much time being that father that I didn't always recognize when it was time to let go and let her figure things out for herself. I started to reflect on how much I had shaped Emily's life, but how much she had also shaped mine in return. I realized that I had been clinging to the version of our relationship where I was her protector, but she was no longer that little girl who needed me in the same way. She had grown into a confident woman with her own goals and dreams, someone who no longer needed to rely on me to tell her what to do. But that didn't mean she didn't need me at all. One weekend, Emily came home for a visit. She was excited to share some updates with me, and as we sat in the kitchen, chatting over coffee, it felt like old times again. The tension that had existed when she first moved away had slowly dissolved, and we had fallen into a rhythm of checking in with each other regularly. There were no long silences, no awkward moments, just two people who had learned to navigate the complexities of their evolving relationship. "Dad, I've been thinking about something," she said, stirring her coffee absently, "about everything that's happened over the past year. How much we've both changed." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I don't think I ever really understood what it meant to be independent until now," she said softly, her eyes focused on the steam rising from her cup. "I thought I did before, but moving away, taking on this new role, it's made me realize just how much I relied on you, even without realizing it, not for answers, but for support, for the reassurance that I wasn't alone." I smiled, listening closely, taking in every word. "I guess in a way, we both needed each other to let go of the roles we had been playing. You had to let go of trying to fix everything for me, and I had to let go of needing you to do that," she continued, her voice thoughtful. I was quiet for a moment, feeling the weight of her words. "I'm proud of you. Am proud of how far you've come and how much you've grown. I never want you to feel like you're doing it alone, but I also want you to know that you've always been capable of handling whatever comes your way. I'm not the answer to everything, but I'll always be here when you need me." She looked up at me, her eyes bright. "And I'm here for you too. Dad, it's not just about what you've given me. It's about what we've both learned. I've learned how to trust myself, and I think you've learned to trust me too." As Emily grew more into herself and her career, I began to find a new rhythm too. My relationship with her had gone from one of dependency on both sides to one of mutual respect and understanding. There were moments when she needed guidance, but they were fewer and farther between. I didn't feel as needed in the same way I had before, and at first that was difficult to accept. But the truth was I wasn't meant to be everything for her. My role as a father was to equip her with the tools she needed to succeed, not to make every decision for her. As she settled into her new life, I found myself rediscovering things I had lost over the years. I rekindled old hobbies, spent more time with friends, and began focusing on aspects of my life that I had pushed aside. The quiet was no longer something I feared. Instead, it became a space where I could reflect, grow, and embrace the change that was happening all around me. One evening, I received a surprise phone call from Emily. She was calling from her new city, and her voice was filled with excitement. "Dad, I have some amazing news!" she exclaimed. "Tell me," I said, eager to hear what was going on. "I did it. I've been promoted to senior manager at work. This is the big break I've been waiting for, and it feels so surreal. I'm doing it, Dad. I'm really doing it." I could hear the joy in her voice, the pride she was feeling for herself. It was the sound of someone who had worked hard and earned every bit of success they had, and I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride myself. "Congratulations, Em," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I knew you could do it. You've worked so hard and you deserve this. You really do. She paused, and for a moment there was silence on the other end. Then she spoke softly, almost as if she were reflecting on everything that had led up to this moment. Thank you, Dad, for everything. For teaching me how to trust myself, how to fight for what I want. I couldn't have gotten here without you. I smiled, a quiet sense of contentment washing over me. You've earned it all, Em, and I couldn't be prouder. Part 9. The Unseen Sacrifice. Months passed, and Emily continued to excel in her new role, making strides in her career that even she hadn't anticipated. Each time she called to share the news of her successes, I felt a mixture of pride and awe. She was becoming the person I had always hoped she would be, someone who was not only capable but confident in her decisions. But as Emily thrived, I began to notice something else, a quiet toll that was being taken on her. It wasn't physical, but it was something I could see in the way she spoke, the subtle signs of exhaustion in her voice. When she called after a particularly grueling day at work, she was carrying the weight of her ambitions and responsibilities, and while she seemed to handle it all with grace, I could see the cracks forming beneath the surface. One evening, I received a call from her, but this time her voice sounded different, strained, tired, almost defeated. Dad, she said quietly, I don't know if I can keep doing this. Keep doing what, Em? I asked, my concern deepening. What's going on? The job, the promotions, the constant pressure to do more, be more. I feel like I'm losing myself in all of this. I wanted this, but now I'm not sure what it's costing me. My heart sank. This was not the Emily I had known, the confident young woman who was ready to take on the world. This was someone who was grappling with the very thing she had worked so hard to achieve, success, but at the expense of her own well-being. Em, it's okay to feel this way, I said softly. You've been pushing yourself so hard for so long. Maybe it's time to step back for a moment and breathe. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. I don't know how to step back, Dad. I feel like if I do, I'll lose everything I've worked for, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I sat there for a moment, reflecting on the weight of her words. It was clear that Emily had sacrificed so much to get where she was. But in doing so, she had started to lose herself. The constant drive to prove herself, to be the best, had consumed her in a way I hadn't seen before. Em, your worth isn't measured by the job you have or the position you hold. It's measured by who you are. And right now, I see someone who's been working so hard, she's forgotten that she deserves peace too. I could hear her sigh on the other end of the line. And for the first time in a while, she didn't have a quick response. I could tell she was processing my words, letting them sink in. I think I've been afraid, Dad, she said finally. Afraid of slowing down. Afraid of not being good enough if I'm not constantly achieving. I've been so focused on success that I forgot to enjoy the journey. I felt a deep sense of understanding wash over me. In many ways, I had been there myself, consumed by the pressures of life, by the constant need to be more, do more. But Emily was learning what I had only learned much later, and that true, success isn't just about accomplishments. It's about balance, peace, and taking time to nurture the parts of ourselves that don't always show up in a job title or paycheck. You don't have to be perfect all the time, Em, I said, my voice gentle. You've already proven that you're capable of more than most people could ever imagine. But you also need to take care of yourself. Success isn't worth it if you lose yourself along the way. There was a long pause before she spoke again. This time her voice was softer, more at ease. I think you're right, Dad. I think I need to find a balance. I've been so focused on proving myself that I've forgotten the importance of just being, just living. Maybe it's time to take a step back, prioritize the things that really matter. I'll always support you. No matter what you decide, Em, I said, my heart swelling with pride. Remember, it's okay to take a break. to enjoy life outside of work. The world will still be there when you come back, but your well-being is more important. Emily thanked me, and we ended the call with a renewed sense of understanding. I knew it wasn't going to be easy for her to slow down, to give herself the space to just be, but I also knew that she was ready. She had learned so much about herself over the past few years, and now she was learning the most important lesson of all, to value herself for who she was, not just for what she accomplished. Over the next few months, Emily began to take more time for herself. She started saying no to extra projects at work, taking weekends off to travel and relax, and rediscovered her love for simple pleasures, like spending time outdoors, reading, and even trying her hand at painting again, just as she had done when she was younger. Her transformation was remarkable. She still worked hard, still took her career seriously, but she no longer let it consume her. She had learned how to strike a balance, to be ambitious while also taking care of her mind and soul. One evening, after several weeks of living with more intention, Emily called me to share something special. "Dad, I'm finally feeling like myself again," she said, her voice light and free. "I'm not perfect, but I'm okay with that. I'm starting to enjoy the little moments, and I'm not constantly rushing to the next thing." "I'm proud of you, Em," I said, my voice filled with warmth. "You've always had it in you. I'm glad you found your peace." Emily laughed softly. "Thanks, Dad. I think I finally understand what you meant all along, that success doesn't mean anything if you're not happy. And right now I'm happy." And in that moment, I realized that Emily had come full circle. She had learned the importance of balance, of taking care of herself, and of finding joy in the journey rather than just the destination. She had gone from being a driven, work-focused young woman to someone who knew how to enjoy life, embrace imperfections, and prioritize what truly mattered. As her father, there was no greater gift I could receive than knowing that she was thriving, not just in her career, but in her life. Part 10. The Full Circle. A year had passed since Emily made her decision to embrace a more balanced life. She had learned the art of self-care, how to juggle work without losing herself in the grind. But even more than that, she had come to understand that success wasn't just about achievements or accolades. It was about finding peace, joy, and connection with the people who mattered most. It was an ordinary Sunday afternoon when Emily called me, her voice filled with excitement and something else. Something I hadn't heard in her for a while. It was the sound of contentment, of a life well lived, of a person who had finally found her place in the world. "Dad, you won't believe it," she said, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. "I'm taking a month off. I'm going to travel, do some things I've always wanted to do. I'm just going to live a little." I smiled, feeling a sense of pride wash over me. It was the first time in a long while that I had heard her speak with such a carefree spirit. She had spent so much of her life chasing after success, climbing ladders, proving herself to everyone. But now, she was finally doing something for herself. "That sounds amazing, Em. Where are you going?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I haven't decided yet," she replied with a laugh. "I think I'll just see where the road takes me. Maybe somewhere warm, or maybe the mountains. Somewhere to clear my mind and just be. No work, no expectations." "You deserve it, Em," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm proud of you. For everything. For all the growth you've gone through. For learning how to slow down and enjoy life. You've come so far." She was quiet for a moment, and I could feel the weight of her words as she spoke again, more softly this time. "You know, Dad, I've learned so much from you over the years. Not just the big lessons, but the little ones. The way you taught me to value the moments in between, to find happiness not in what I achieve, but in the people around me, in the simple things." I think I finally get it. Hearing those words, I realized that Emily had become everything I had hoped for and more. Not just successful, not just independent, but content and at peace with who she was. She had figured out the secret to true happiness. It wasn't in the hustle, the race, or the accolades. It was in the quiet moments, the time spent with family, and the ability to be present in her own life.
As the months passed, Emily took her trip, and I could tell that something had shifted in her. She returned with a sense of calm, a newfound appreciation for the things she had once overlooked. She had traveled to a few different places, met new people, and experienced life in a way that she never had before. The time away had given her the space she needed to reconnect with herself, to rediscover the parts of her that had been overshadowed by ambition and work. When she returned, we sat down together, and she shared stories from her travels. She told me about the beautiful sunsets she had witnessed, the conversations with strangers that had changed her perspective, and the moments of peace she had found in the solitude of nature. But what struck me most was how different she seemed. She wasn't just the young woman who had been chasing success. She was someone who had learned to live for the moment, to appreciate life as it came, without constantly striving for more. "I feel like I finally figured out how to live, Dad," she said, her voice calm and content. "I don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I just need to be me." I couldn't help but smile. "I'm glad you're at peace, Em. I'm proud of you, more than you know." A few weeks later, Emily invited me to a small dinner with some of her close friends. It wasn't anything fancy, just a few people gathering at her apartment to celebrate her recent achievements and, more importantly, the fact that she had found a new sense of balance in her life. As we sat around the table, sharing stories and laughter, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride and joy. Emily was no longer the young woman I had worried so much about. She was her own person, with her own dreams, her own path, and most importantly, her own happiness. As the night wore on, Emily raised her glass in a toast to family, to growth, and to finding peace in the chaos. We all clinked our glasses, and I realized that the toast wasn't just for the people around the table. It was for the journey we had all been on, the challenges, the growth, the love, and the understanding that had brought us here. I looked at Emily, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was losing her. I felt like we were finally meeting on equal ground, both of us stronger, more fulfilled, and more connected than we had ever been. The journey wasn't over, but it had come full circle. We had learned, we had grown, and we had found our way back to each other in a new, deeper way. And in that, I realized that the greatest lesson I had taught Emily, and that she had taught me, was that life isn't about the destination, it's about the journey, the lessons along the way, and the people who walk with you. And as we raised our glasses that night, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together, as father and daughter, but also as friends, partners in this journey of life.